What about Prov Thorns? But the bullets in
I have
Deepwoken are weak,
90%
but
physical
Deepwoken are
resistance
water and
and
cannonballs.
balls.
Prediction solos.
Shut up! Oh my god! In my last video, I had no idea how many people would start defending the Deepwoken world, claiming it wins against the USA's entire armed forces. So let's address the various claims you guys made, which are all debunkable and all bad. Starting out with the fact that I nerfed the US by not allowing them to use the song. If they could, it's such a clean sweep, which is why I literally gave them the nerf where the US cannot use the song. They can't get bells, and they can't use attunements. But it's still a clean sweep, it's insane. First of all, the argument, but I have Providence Thorns. Do you guys really think the US Armed Forces are as smart as mud skippers? If they see shooting you as killing their troops, they're not gonna keep shooting you. Which is where a whole lot of stuff you can't counter by parrying comes in. Carpet bombs, unparryable. And before someone says, but I have ghosts and I can dodge it, well, first of all, it's a carpet bomb, you know, it comes down in rows. Like Ash Slam, maybe that's a way that you guys can understand it. It is a roll catch like Ash Slam, and it's unparryable because it's a bomb coming from the sky, right? And then, but I have Ghost. You don't have a gas mask. I didn't mention it, but a whole lot of you think the US just wouldn't use chemical warfare here. Your 90% physical resistance mage build doesn't have chem resistance, does it? I didn't think so. Worst case, any living being gets spiked with mustard gas. And as for the people saying prediction solos, let me see you predict hydrogen sulfide filling your lungs and killing you within 2 breaths, because that's how fast it kills a person. Your physical resistance doesn't account for chem resistance because the Deepwoken world is about to be introduced to more chemical weapons than they could ever possibly adapt to. And before anyone says Gale Breath users could filter out the toxic chems, no, actually, you couldn't. Gale Breath doesn't literally control every aspect of the air around you, it controls wind. And while you can try to fan it away, most lethal gas neurotic compound, hydrogen sulfide for example, is significantly heavier than air, meaning you can't blow it away effectively before your lungs rupture in about 2 breaths, which is enough to kill you. The lightest chemical compound being tear gas would still disorient you and render you blind, so unless you're a blind seer, good luck. And if you are a blind seer, enjoy the hydrogen sulfide, because they just went from trying to contain you to trying to kill you, and that hydrogen sulfide is killing you. Now, another thing, Deepwoken characters reach peak human physical status at 15 points, making a peak Deepwoken character, which has about 330 stat points, about 20 times to 22 times stronger than a person. Crazy statistics, right? But let's put that in numbers. You can bench press about 3,500 pounds, making you slightly stronger than a prime gorilla. You're also about 22 times faster than the average person, so you can run at about 150 miles per hour. Now, these are actually pretty easy to equate to characters you guys might know. Captain America, Soldier Boy, yeah, they are equivalent to Deepwoken max power 20s. Of course, they don't have the magic aspects, but physically, you are Captain America. So a Deepwoken character is about as strong as a super serum abusing human. Cool and all, but you aren't. You're still human, you're just way stronger. You still have vulnerabilities, and even if a modern bullet can't damage you, chemical weapons definitely will. And let's say they don't. Do you think Captain America could beat all 1.3 million of the US's armed forces? Yeah. I didn't think so either, and if you do, you are delusional. And also, bullets will probably still hurt you, because your shitty black powder guns do. So I'm sure if I shot your Deepwoken character in the head with, I don't know, a Desert Eagle Mark 18 with my custom engravings on the side of it, you wouldn't be alright. Next up is for the people who use the argument, the Duke and other bosses get 15,000 health per person in his arena. That's not lore. Gameplay mechanics that exist for balancing are not lore, and we're not counting that. And back to the Duke, but some people really think the topography of his base really matters. It doesn't. Send a bunker buster down there on the Duke and we'll see what his lab is really made of. Here's a hint, nothing strong enough to withstand American explosives. If we don't want to assassinate the Duke with a SEAL team, then we could just level his mansion and bury his lab in rubble, and he either suffocates down there or comes up to die to the US soldiers anyway. Once that windshield is down, that bullet's gonna travel so fast he'll wake him in the depths with a hole in his head before he even knows what hit him. And if the US already established their depths bases, then he's getting wiped. And for those of you thinking that our guns can't hurt him, if your guns can, ours can, and they are better. The next argument is that Deepwoken guns would be so weak, so ours would be weak too. Those are Deepwoken guns. Your D-tier black powder musket is shooting with an 800th of the force of a modern day carbine rifle, and also you're shooting these little iron balls, not hollow points. The guns back then were so bad that they rarely killed people, usually just resulting in injury where you were more likely to die from an infection than a shot to the head. That's how weak the guns are in Deepwoken, and that's how weak they were 400 years ago. Not only that, but someone even said, we have solid iron balls as bullets, not those lame copper aluminum ones. Do you know why we switched to copper and aluminum bullets like 100 years ago? Because they're better and they're cheaper. Force distributed on a point does more damage, so a pointed bullet is doing more damage than your stupid little iron ball, because that little point that's at the end of the bullet, multiplying that force by like 100 times. Next up is people saying that young Shoal causes insanity in the depths, not the dark. Well, more than likely the US would establish a mutually beneficial partnership with the Ignition Union, receiving anti-insanity lamps to help them. If you think I'm wrong about this and you think it's an unlikely hypothetical, no it isn't. The US's #1 foreign expansion procedure is establishing meaningful partnerships. And for those of you who think they wouldn't realize what's going on, how dumb do you think American military scientists are? Like, we do the most military advancements in the entire world. The US knows what a cognito hazard is. And the depths isn't really underwater either. It's a different realm, technically physically existing, both not within but also within the real world. It's hard to explain, but for those of you saying the guns wouldn't work in the depths, they would, okay? They just would. The depths has different physics slightly, but it's not actually underwater with the same physics as being underwater. And even if they didn't, there are guns designed to fire underwater. And I don't know how you guys are saying they wouldn't work underwater, because the Deepwoken guns work underwater, so why wouldn't my M4 work underwater? It would, okay? Well, at least in the Deepwoken depths it would. Next up, what I've seen is the US would need to construct silos to launch bombs and house troops. Good thing Deepwoken has tons of open mines with infinitely regenerating resources. Oh, and did you guys forget that the US Army has 37,000 employed engineers and construction workers, another 200,000 scientists dedicated to understanding Deepwoken's various but simple ores, and I'm like 90% sure one of those 200,000 scientists would discover the song if I let them. So maybe don't underestimate the US's central intelligence as far as the army goes. And for those of you thinking bullets and guns are either hard to or take a lot of materials to make, they don't. Within the Deepwoken world, you can mass produce most of these with just the iron that they have. And we have guns and ammo, right? Those can be mass produced in days while troops are hunting Sharkos to extinction for food. Some of you also seem to think that the enforcers would actually be a big problem. Do you think that the US aren't communicating threats to each other? Radio waves are super easy to concentrate, and radios and walkie-talkies are super cheap to make. If the US hears about a heavily armored threat, they'll just start using explosives, which are easily mass produced, by the way. And about the Heart of Enmity, upon hearing about a much larger threat manifesting, when sending in groups larger than 5, they can easily just not send in groups larger than 5. And if they really need to, portable L2L ballistics launchers exist, and they could be used to take out the Heart of Enmity pretty easily, considering his armor seems to be about 3,000 millimeters of dark steel. Any mid-end military bomb is blowing through the Heart of Enmity's ankles. Now, let's also do some math and show you guys even easier way to do it, right? Do you guys know what thermite is? This, I might not be able to say this, but if you really wanted to make thermite, get aluminum powder and iron powder 1-to-1 ratio, mix it in a plastic bag, and ignite it with either fire or potassium. Potassium underwater because it reacts to the water, which means you could set fires down in the depths using potassium. I know, right? Crazy. Anyway, the depths technically isn't water, but it does have some properties of water, like the way that it quenches flames. That being said, that means that we could use potassium down there to ignite stuff in the depths. Regardless, thermite burns hot enough to stay ignited underwater, and it burns at thousands of degrees, capable of melting through any metal pretty much, except for like tungsten and titanium. You could literally just throw thermite paste bags at the Heart of Enmity's ankles and light it up. Account for what looks like 3,000 millimeter armor, the thermite paste would be able to burn straight through it in about 30 seconds of ignition, so light up that demon's ankles and we've got ourselves a one fight using the power of modern science. The Heart of Enmity is a joke. You could literally either just have someone run up and slap thermite paste all over their ankles, or you could just, take plastic bags and just throw them at the ankles and then light it up with some potassium lines, right? And before you say, how are you going to get plastic bags? You can recreate plastic with the gelatin and collagen found in most animals' fat, and I mean, Deepwoken has monsters and animals, they have to have fat and protein and meat, so it's not really that hard. As for Primadon, some of you think that him tanking cannonballs means anything at all. Cannonballs aren't explosive, first of all, and even if they were, they're literally nothing compared to modern day bombs. Those explosive cannonballs are worse bombs than something I could make in a pressure cooker in my basement with a box of scraps right now while recording this video that's going to be planted in a certain location on Valentine's Day at 5 p.m. They use black powder, which is straight trash compared to modern gunpowder, and even worse than chemically bonded bonds, which don't even use gunpowder anymore because we have so much more powerful ways to make explosions. The Doom of Caranthil is one that I didn't bring up, but cruise missiles can likely damage this thing, and if they can't, it's a real good thing we have halothane and white phosphorus. White phosphorus is highly reactive in water, contaminating most nearby sea area, and also causing burns underwater. And let's be real, any wildlife born in the sea would die in a few days with the USA's level of pollution, so let's not act like that dumb water lizard wouldn't get get a straw stuck in his nose and suffocate or some shit. Worst case, drop a hydrogen bomb on him with the newly constructed silos that 37,000 construction workers could create in about 4 days after a week of harvesting materials, with the 73,000 US miners hard at work getting materials for them. And that's with an E, not an O. Kaido is basically the same thing, but with a bit more threatening because of his mouth laser. Good thing Kaido is also a water lizard, meaning he is cold-blooded with some sort of insulating properties or cold resistance brought on by its ice powers. Doesn't matter though, since his inner ear is going to be a really bad weak spot. Since he is a lizard that lives in water, he would have to have some sort of cochlear mechanisms within his ear that would, just help him balance and be in the water like that. It's kind of like how birds have it. He would need one of those too to adapt to the water pressure. By playing high frequency loud noises, Kaido's inner ear can easily be burst, meaning he can no longer balance, coordinate, or properly swim, making him a super easy target. And if we really wanted to just melt down that dragon, drop a bunch of white phosphorus on him. I don't know the exact anatomy of Kaido, but from a mechanical standpoint, this is what makes the most sense considering that he is a big sea lizard. So, he'd have to have some sort of inner ear mechanisms like birds or deep sea fish do. Next up, people keep talking about Meat Lord and the Drowned Gods. Well, the Meat Lord is impartial, so he probably just wouldn't fight with the US, choosing to either observe or trade with them because he just likes selling meat. As for the Drowned Gods, they would actually probably win, but, they're really not doing much. And also, 70% of Americans are Christian, meaning they have no power over the believers of Jesus Christ, and therefore can't do anything. Which someone also just said in the comments, Jesus isn't real, which that's just not true. I'm not religious, but Jesus was in fact a person. Whether he was magic or not, you can debate. I will not be getting into that, but he was a person. Anyway, someone else said, what about Hosk Vantage, the lore character with the ability to steal souls? Corporate America has no souls to steal, so that actually does render him powerless. And even if it didn't, what are you going to do with those souls? You can't hold all those souls. He doesn't have a soul bag. He can't hold all those souls. Loser. And then there's the really dumb argument of, the seas are too dangerous for boats and submarines. What? Your shitty wooden boat is getting attacked by a lionfish. The dinghy takes minimal damage from a lionfish. The largest submarine in the world has an area of 1.6 million square feet, and it's made entirely out of better quality metal than your ironclad. So how do you even argue that submarines and warships are gonna get torn apart by Kaido or lionfish? That just doesn't make sense. Have you guys been using Kamui for so long you forget how the Deepwoken boats work? We've got better ones in real life, we've got stronger ones in real life, and the monsters in the Deepwoken world aren't destroying your boats, so how are they going to destroy ours? Next up, for those of you who think that Tacit would work, first of all, why would it even matter? It's like, you can't fight using Tacit. And even if it did work, thermal cameras and other thermal devices would read you so easily. For those of you that somehow think the tornado mantra could kill 1.3 million armed soldiers, it's not that big, it's not a real tornado, it's nowhere near as destructive, it's not killing that many people at all. For those of you who think Kamui would be at all useful for some reason, what are you going to do with Kamui? Hide until you starve to death because the only food supply lines are owned by the US now? If you think picking generals and leaders is viable, it isn't. First of all, they're guarded 24/7 with complete military personnel who are probably going to kill you. And even if you kill generals and leaders, the chain of command for every general is about 60 people long, so killing them won't matter because, there's 60 more people you'd have to kill to get their generals. And it still doesn't matter, because all 1.3 million soldiers already know that you're a target. Why kill the generals here? They don't even need to command the soldiers. They're already targeted onto you. So I don't know what you're gonna do against those numbers. Anyway, you also just couldn't kill 1.3 million mudskippers. So imagine an army full of people who are hundreds of times smarter than mudskippers, and probably you watching this video. Not all the soldiers, but like the higher end ones. And then imagine, sorry, the lower end ones sniff crayons, but they're probably still smart enough to just shoot at you. It doesn't matter though, right? You can't kill 1.3 million mudskippers. You can't kill 1.3 million armed soldiers. And then finally, someone was like, oh, what about the diluvian mechanism? This one could actually be a problem due to the small room and the high monster counts at higher waves. So just don't do it. There is no incentive or reason for the US military to do the diluvian mechanism because it doesn't benefit them in any way. Why would they do it? They don't have to. Now, some of you need to get real. Like, the US Armed Forces shred the deep verse, and before anyone says, but the bosses are stronger in lore. Yeah, and the lore-accurate bosses are still getting one-tapped by a hollow point to the head. They have health bars for gameplay reasons. If we wanted to make the fights realistic, then a health bar is actually just a stamina bar, and as soon as the boss runs out of stamina to stop dodging and blocking your attacks, you're one-tapping him. because let's get real, that's closer to how durability would work, realistically. So if I shoot Duke in the head, he's waking up in Lost Shelter. Most of you heavily underestimate science and modern guns, and most of you have no understanding of any sort of physics, so I don't know why you guys are trying to argue with me on this. Anyway, if you enjoyed, subscribe, go like, watch the last video. Hope you all have an amazing day. I love you all, and goodbye.